Are you in Saigon? No, I am at home because they are digging over there to lay the geo line. And so
Ma'am, we'll be going live. Sorry to interrupt. We'll just be going live in about 10 seconds.
Okay, fine. Seeing each other's mouths.
You got Rohan's fishing cat, no? Or what is that in the background, Shomita?
Hello.
Hello, Dr.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
All of you, I mean, good to see you, Dr. Samita, of course, Dr. Umar Ramakrishnan, and then there are other people, Giridhar and who else?
Piyasha.
Yeah.
Hello,
All
sir.
right, sir.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
See you after a long
So-
time.
So we're live now. I think I'll just
you
quickly
start.
begin. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So, namaskar and a very warm welcome on behalf of the Global Tiger Forum to all the speakers and the participants and the audience who joined in live on our YouTube channel. The webinar today that is being hosted under the JEF7 Wildcat project is in commemoration of the World Wetlands Day, which is an environment commitment that dates back to the 1971 to celebrate and value the benefits of the wetlands. The World Wetlands Day was created to raise awareness and bring communities together for the conservation of wetlands, and of course to understand the sustainable how we can use it sustainably for ecosystem services. But however, our webinar today also not just focuses on the wetlands and how they have been important for several species, but it also focuses on a lesser known mesopredator, which is the fishing cat, which is also known to be synchronous with wetland habitats. So before we delve into all the wonderful talks that we have lined up with multiple speakers and who have worked extensively on the Wildcats, I'd now invite our Secretary General and the National Project Manager of the JEF7 Wildcats project, Dr. Rajesh Gopal, to please say a few words before we begin the webinar.
Thank you, Arundhati. And once again, I say that it's too good to see all of you and Dr. Umar, Dr. Samita, and everybody here. So it's a very important thing what is being done now virtually. So very soon we'll have meetings also in one of the tiger reserves where the project is getting implemented. That component has not started yet. So the significance of this project for a group like this, I need not waste time on saying all that. But one important thing, take away from this and this small project is it will give us a lot of insights and the way forward for incorporation in the working plan code certain portfolios which at present are not there. So number one. Number two, it will also give us a lot of insights and an opportunity to incorporate some thematic actions in the management plan guidelines of protected areas and also the TCP guidelines. So in that context, this becomes very important. I've gone through the past record and all that and what has happened so far. The focus, as all of us are aware, has been on some larger charismatic big cats and small cats, the important role they play, and so much has been done on them that they are extremely important. And during the last meet, Dr. Samita participated, and a lot of useful insights were provided by her. And today we'll hear what I mean whatever information, scientific, empirical data or findings you want to share with us virtually. We'll hear all that and we'll take this forward and then we'll do more to have such interactions. Thank you very much once again, and thanks everyone for your participation. I'm keen to hear you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for those opening words. With this, now we begin the series of talks that we have planned for today's webinar. So beginning today's talk is, today's webinar, opening the talk is Dr. Shomita Mukherjee, who is the principal scientist at the Salim Ali Center for Ornithology and Natural History. So Dr. Shomita is a wildlife biologist by training with a doctorate in wildlife science from the Wildlife Institute of India. So over the course of her career, she has studied several small cat species throughout India. Today, she will speak to us more on the ambassadors of wetlands, that are fishing cats, and provide insights into the natural history, its distribution, and other ecological aspects. So over to you, Dr. Shomita, to please begin the talk.
Thank you very much. And shall I start sharing the screen? Yeah. And
Yes,
can I
please go
just,
ahead.
turn off my video?
Sure.
If I can now, I'll have to figure out how to. Anyway, forget that. So, I'll be talking about the fishing cat and why we consider it the ambassador of wetlands in India. So I'll be briefly describing the cat, describing a bit of its peculiar habit. I'll be talking about the threats that it faces and the way forward that we could possibly take to save not only the cat, but of course, since it's a wetlands day, its habitat as well. So its scientific name is Prionaluris vivarinus, and vivarinus means ferret-like or civet-like. And can you see the screen as yet? I am not able
Yes.
to. Just a minute.
Yes, the screen is visible.
Okay, but I'm not able to see it for some reason. Something's gone wrong. Okay, so yeah, there it is. So it is civet-like. So if you look at its form, it is a little different from a typical cat. Of course, it looks like a cat, but it kind of has an elongated skull and it has an elongated body. It looks elongated because it has shorter limbs and a very short tail, and it is spotted. Okay, and all these are adaptations to its very unique aquatic life. And if you look at its distribution in India, it is very widespread. You can see those little tiny black, red dots scattered across in some of the places. That's also where there are just point locations of the fishing cat. And then you have these red patches and the orange patch where it is confirmed, and the pink patches where we think it may be present, but we do not have data from these regions. You know, it has a very peculiar distribution also, even worldwide. If you look at it globally, to the west of India, it occurs in Pakistan in the Sindh province. And to the east, it occurs in a lot of countries in Southeast Asia, going possibly up to Vietnam. We don't have robust information from a lot of those places, so we really do not know if they still occur there. But yes, India and Sri Lanka and Nepal are actually its strongholds. And so I'll be talking mainly about the threats that the cat faces within India, because that's where we have information from, because there's quite a bit of research, relatively speaking, for a small cat that has happened with the fishing cat. So what we do know is that it is a habitat specialist. And by that, I mean that it is very strongly tied to wetland habitats, whether they are mangroves on the coast, or they're inland wetlands, or they're marshlands, or swampy areas. So any kind of a wetland is where you could potentially expect the fishing cat to be, provided there are other resources available, like vegetation, like fish, like other prey. And again, look at I'll come back to some of the other adaptations. It has small ears and it has webs on its feet, kind of partially webbed feet, which allow it to swim. And I've even observed it in Bharatpur swimming underwater, actually. So they can actually go even dive deep inside the water also, and for extended periods of time. And of course, fish is a very prominent feature of its diet, but it also eats other, so though it's a habitat specialist, it's not necessarily a dietary specialist, because as you know, a cat would kill anything that moves. And because wetlands are important for all other forms of life, so you get rodents, birds that come over there, and the cat also catches that and eats it. But yes, fish is an important part of its diet. And it lives along with not just other cats. Here you can see the jungle cat, but it also lives along with the leopard cat and the rusty spotted cat and the otters and jackals and even other taxa, like, you find in fishing cat habitat, some of their habitats are prime heronry areas, so even birds occur there, insects, amphibians, fish, reptiles. And so this cat, because it is not just because mammals are more so-called charismatic, and also this is a cat that is not really small, not really large. It is a medium-sized cat. It weighs between 10 to 15 kilos on average, with the females being around 30% smaller than the males, like typically of the smaller cats. And because it is such a specialist on this habitat, and because of the specialization, it performs certain very crucial ecosystem services. It can indicate the health of a wetland, and the health, I mean the entire ecosystem along with all the other species. That's why we consider it as an ambassador for wetlands. So if you know that there is a fishing cat habitat, and you know there are fishing cats there, you can be pretty sure that it is perhaps a healthy ecosystem. Of course, there are threats, and we'll have to monitor those and see how they can affect the wetlands in the future. So one very peculiar habitat of the fishing cat is, so when you go looking for the fishing cat, how would you find it? Because they're nocturnal, they're shy, they live either in pairs or single, and it's very difficult to really spot them unless you move out in the night. And one of the peculiar habits is that they defecate in what are known as latrines. Okay, so they find these very conspicuous spots, like, culverts or large cement tanks or cement bodies, or anything that is very, very conspicuous even to us. And you'll find a profuse, set of scats over there. And we found this, I had found this in Bharatpur while I was doing my master's dissertation. I found it in Koringa on the eastern coast, which I think Giridhar may be speaking about. I found it in the Sundarbans. Piyasha was part of this survey, and we did this analysis later on in Uma's lab. So you see, we are all connected somehow, all the fishing cat people. And we found this in many places. Like, you look at it in Dudhwa, you'll see there is this little bridge, and the bridge is, you can see those things on the bridge, that is all fishing cat scat. Now, how did we figure out they were fishing cat scat? Because, you get otters over there, you get leopard cat over there, you get jungle cat over there. So these cats look very similar. We basically went to the lab and we designed primers and we extracted DNA, and Uma will be talking more about it in the next talk. So I won't go into detail. But basically, in areas where you cannot always place camera traps. So a lot of information that we get from fishing cats is from bycatch data, from the tiger surveys or tiger population estimations that happen across the country. But the problem there is that those grids that are laid for tiger, the tiger is so huge, it's a 200 kilo, 150, 200 kilo cat. The fishing cat is just 10 to 15 kilos. So obviously the grid size that is meant for tigers does not suit that of the fishing cat, and we possibly lose out a lot of information there. Moreover, fishing cats do occur in areas where tigers do not occur. And the problem with placing camera traps, there's another problem, is that if you place it in really strongly human-dominated areas, they are going to get picked up. So there's going to be a lot of theft, a lot of money loss. So one of the other methods which we really need to, improvise, which is what Uma's lab is doing, is looking at molecular techniques to survey the cats. And I'll mention that a little bit at the end, why they're important. Now, coming to the threat, one of the most severe threats the fishing cat faces is habitat loss. And though you may say habitat loss is a threat for every species on Earth, for the fishing cat, it's a terrible threat simply because this habitat, the wetland, which is a prime habitat or the only habitat of the fishing cat, is also something that humans prize a lot. Most civilizations happened around wetland areas. And if you look at this picture along the coast over here, which at one time would have all been fishing cat habitat, and you can see how, it has been developed for human use. And something that is really fast coming up is aquaculture farms. So even today, I read in the news that the new budget is actually really pushing aquaculture farms. Okay, so we really have to take into account conservation of these ecosystems if we are pushing economy also, because what aquaculture does is it pumps out a lot of pollution. It not just takes away the habitat, it also pollutes the area, and moreover, it creates a cause for conflict. So obviously, if it's a commercial aquaculture farm, they will probably not be tolerant about, fishing cats coming and catching some of their prized prawns or fish or whatever. And there's a lot of retaliatory killing because this cat is neither big nor small. Because it's not small, it is probably more conspicuous. Because it's not big, it is not really that dangerous. People won't go attacking a tiger as easily as they would go attacking a small cat, a smaller cat like the fishing cat. Now, there are other threats that are general to a lot of taxa, like climate change, and there is an increasing frequency of cyclones around the eastern coast, which is fishing cat habitat. And there's another very strong threat that is coming up is the increasing linear infrastructure around fishing cat habitats, and you find lots of roadkills. So this is around the Terai region. And again, you can see lots of agriculture over here, just around, and built up areas around fishing cat habitats. And then you have something like the invasive species. Like in Bharatpur, for a long time, they believed the fishing cat was extinct because they hadn't really observed it at all for many, many years. And one of the reasons was that there was this red algae that was growing all across the water bodies. And what I feel is the fishing cats just moved away simply because they really couldn't look into the water to catch their fish. It was so completely covered with paspalum. And now it's, so we have to, I think in Dudhwa and some places, there were, similar issues where a lot of invasive species or species that are very, which spread very prolifically, kind of invaded the wetlands. So that's another thing we have to be careful about in looking at fishing cat habitat. Now, what is the way forward? So obviously research, we need a lot of information, which we don't have. Even though there are so many projects running, we really are very, very low on the kind of information we require to actually look and monitor populations. So we need new techniques. We need molecular tools along with camera trapping so that we can look not only at PAs, but we can also look outside PAs. We need to look at ecology, which is really something that very few look at. We need to know more about their diet. We need to know how they compete with coexisting species. How do they use their habitat? We need to have some hold on population estimates, on population connectivity, both physical and genetic. And we need to establish proper, robust protocols for this. So for this, we need to network. Every organization, every individual, every NGO has their own strengths. Now we need to network, to get together and collaborate and start forming a very strong team to look at not just fishing cats, to look at lots of other, just wetlands on the whole. So for surveys, we need to survey populations outside PAs. We need a map of the spread of aquaculture and agriculture, which we still do not have because aquaculture is a pretty new feature that has come in. And we really need to get hold of, the estimate. What I read was there was something like an 800% increase in aquaculture in maybe a decade or so, and which is really, really staggering. Okay, because that, like I mentioned, it not just converts the habitat, but it does a lot of other things. And I think Tiasha may be speaking about that a little bit. And because she's working in Chilika, where that is a major problem. And then we have to restore its habitat and protect it. One of the major issues is policies that are not really ecologically oriented. We need to move them towards a more ecologically oriented policy. So we now have, I think, something called the blue economy that's coming up. And we need to pay attention when we talk of blue economy. It shouldn't only be fisheries and aquaculture and economy. It needs to be ecologically oriented. So we do have very good policies like Mishti, we have Manrega, we have Amrut Dharohar, which are all tied to wetlands. And we have this concept called other ecological conservation measures, where, we can have land that belongs to communities, to government, to private parties, that can be brought into the conservation, world. And for that, we need to spread awareness, which we all know. I think one of the very strong, already existing measures is the provision, or what the Biological Diversity Act actually mandates is the activity of, or basically to get the BMCs, or the biological monitoring committees, to be more active to prepare their people's biodiversity registers, which can be a very, very strong feature in fighting anything that is, any EIA that is badly done, or which is not really done in, because EIAs are just windows, snapshots, of a pattern. Whereas PBRs have to be updated. And if locals are doing it and they're trained in doing it well, it can be something, we can have long-term data, which can be very powerful in fighting off badly done EIAs in court. Okay, and of course, we have to address conflict and killing by locals. That can only happen through awareness, road signs to prevent road kills. We need international collaborations across borders. We just had a meeting conducted by the GTF on the same program, where we looked at international collaborations for research and conservation. We need to have red list assessments every 3 to 5 years to be able to get hold of what it is that is happening to the habitat and the species. That's about all that I have to say for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shobita, for giving an overview of the fishing cat status, distribution, and how do we go forward with when we talk about conservation of the cat and the habitat that it occupies. So we will take question answers for your session towards the end. We'll quickly move on to our second talk for today, which is by Dr. Uma Ramakrishnan, who is a professor at the National Center for Biological Sciences, TIFR, Bangalore. So Dr. Uma is a molecular ecologist by training and has worked extensively to investigate population genetics and evolutionary history of mammals in the Indian subcontinent. She has been a recipient of numerous awards and scholarships over the course of her academic and professional career. And in today's talk, she will provide insights into the world of genetics, which is pertinent for fishing cat conservation in India. So over to you, Dr. Uma, to please begin your talk.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Arunati, and thank you for the invitation. So I'm going to quickly zoom in a little bit from what Shomita provided, a very broad overview. That was very nice. Thank you, Shomita. And I should give a disclaimer that I usually work on big cats. And so this is work of my PhD student, Divyashree Rana, mostly.
Ma'am, you're muted.
Okay. As you know already from Shomita, today's Wetland Day, and fishing cats are icons of wetlands. Sorry. But you might be wondering, what is a geneticist doing here talking about, fishing cats? So we all know that every one of our cells has DNA. It's like basically like a book, and we can read this DNA now. Novel technologies, especially in the last 10 years, have allowed a massive increase in our ability to do so. And this DNA has a story written in it. It has clues about, species history, about ecology, and can also help predict future trajectories. We can use DNA to understand things like fragmentation. So imagine you had a large patch of habitat, which now maybe for sake of discussion through aquaculture, etc., is fragmented. Signatures of this fragmentation will show up in DNA from animals across these habitats. DNA can also be used to understand, what species is there, what diet a cat is eating, and so on. So there's many, many uses, both in ecology as well as, past and future predictions that DNA can provide. Also, really, the good thing about DNA is it's very stable and it can be collected non-invasively. You must have read about, the sequencing of genomes of extinct species like mammoths. And the reason we can do this is because DNA survives the test of time. And frankly, because it can be collected non-invasively, it works really well for species which are elusive like the fishing cat. So sometimes, people have, in the past, we have also done surveys, ecological surveys for species. Shomita showed pictures of fishing cat latrines, where we might assume that a species, a fecal sample is from a fishing cat. And this is a picture of a pug mark which you may use in a survey, or a fecal sample which you may find while you're doing a survey. But some work which we have done, which is not yet published, but we're collating, shows that if you just use kind of a guesstimate based on field experience as to what the species might be, very often 30% of the time you assign the wrong species identity to a scat. We check the true species identity by doing genetics, and we also assign species identity in the field. And also, 25% of the time, you also are unsure. Maybe it's an otter, maybe it's a fishing cat. So relying purely on field-associated IDing of scats or such surveys may not be adequate for species like the fishing cat, which co-occur with many other carnivores, where we may be unsure or we may make mistakes about where fishing cats actually occur. So basically, some work that Divyashree did as part of a master's thesis investigated fishing cats across their distribution in India, and this is a map suggestive of their distribution. And you can see immediately that as such, the distribution itself looks very fragmented. So does this fragmentation impact their genetic diversity, and how diversity is distributed across these populations? So she basically collected samples from several locations across the fishing cat range in India, and you can see them labeled here. Basically, broadly in three kind of clusters: populations from the Tarai. For example, this is some Tarai habitat. Populations from eastern India, and this is where areas where, for example, Tiasa works, and also populations from southern India, the eastern coast, where one of our other speakers, Giridhar, works as well. So basically, when we collected these samples and basically through swab, we collect a swab of a fecal sample, and you use this swab to get DNA in the lab. We identify the species first, then we, in this case, amplified regions of the DNA called microsatellites, and we use that data to identify individuals and investigate variation. So what did we find? So first of all, we compared fishing cats to two other co-occurring cats, jungle cats and leopard cats. And for mitochondrial DNA, this is DNA inherited from your mother. The reason we make this comparison is there's a lot of data for mitochondrial DNA. We found that fishing cats actually had lower diversity. Their mitochondrial DNA was less variable than for jungle cats or fishing cats. This is not so surprising, because if you asked anyone, they would agree there's probably more jungle cats and leopard cats, and they are more continuously and widely distributed. So what's nice is, this is just a sequence, but you're seeing information about ecology. It is getting reflected in the fishing cat's DNA as well. When we looked at population structure, or whether fishing cats from the Tarai, from the Howrah area, or from Andhra were different from each other, we found that indeed, fishing cats from the Tarai were closer to each other than they were to fishing cats in Andhra or Howrah, and so on. So we do see these three clusters of populations that form through the genetic data. We also looked at genetic variation in the context of mitochondrial DNA. And what you see here is basically a network. You can think of it as a ball and stick figure. The more the balls, the more the variation. Those are differences or different sequences. And first of all, you can see immediately there's not a lot of variation, but whatever variation is there, it seems like, for example, the Tarai, the red balls are all over the place, whereas, there's only, the Andhra, for example, has very low variation. There's only one haplotype or one genetic variant. So this kind of suggested to us that, basically fishing cats do have small and isolated fragmented populations, is already reflecting in their genetic diversity. But also, it seems like the Tarai is an important habitat, and this has already been mentioned before. It seems like it might be a stronghold or a very important landscape for us to understand and delve deeper. And so at this point, Divyashree started her PhD, and basically She has been working in the Terai. So this is just a picture to show you this habitat is very variable. There are floodplains, and so you can see there's a lot of wetland habitats. But there are also, for example, these railway tracks and various kinds of linear barriers. The whole of Dudhwa has a railway line running all the way through it. But still, in these parks, there are these beautiful fishing cats existing. So this is a camera trap picture from WWF and the UP Forest Department. However, the fishing cats in the Terai still do face threats. So this is an example of a fishing cat which has gotten caught in a trap aimed to capture a leopard, because there's a lot of conflict in the Terai with larger cats. And so there are a lot of management, important action oriented on-ground efforts to try to capture these problem animals. And sometimes as bycatch, fishing cats do get caught. So there are, possibilities of threat in this, potential stronghold for the fishing cat. And so basically, some other data from WWF suggested that there are pretty decent densities of fishing cats, 3 to 4 per 100 square kilometers and so on. But what we were really curious to understand is, how rare are these fishing cats? Are they connected across the landscape in the Terai habitat? And do they face any kinds of threats? So basically, this is just an illustration to show that, you may have fishing cats, but there are all these barriers which are thrown into their habitats. On one hand, you may think the Terai is this, big wetland, right? So maybe they're just completely connected. But on the other hand, there are all these potential barriers. So we are very curious to understand how these barriers, which we know are barriers, say, for big cats, how are they affecting these small cats? Are they affecting them? Or maybe they're not affecting them at all. So basically, the problem with doing something like this is, while we have a lot of methods for species of big cats like tigers, we don't have good genetic methods for fishing cats. The work I showed you earlier was a bit unsatisfying for us, because the problem with microsatellites is there's a lot of error in scoring them, and they also don't have a lot of statistical power. So they become a bit of a weak source of information. So what we're trying to do now is something very kind of bold and a bit crazy. We're trying to develop a panel of markers which would work for all cats. They'll work for big cats and they'll work for small cats. And what we're trying to do is to work with 70 to 90 regions, or information bits, shall we say, for small cats, and 50 plus information bits for larger cats or for Panthera. So basically, we can look at all this information together and design something common which would work for all of these. And so far what we have found is that, we're just testing this out, and it does seem to show some patterns. For example, here you can see, the 3 Prionailurus species, and they are separating out, these 3 colors. So we have samples from these known samples from these species, and we tested our panel to see, can it first of all distinguish between these different species? And the answer is yes. Now, these are all different individuals. So clearly it is distinguishing individuals also. So if it was only able to distinguish species, all the brown spots would be on top of each other, but they are not, they are spread out. So we are now working to standardize this better, and then also see, for example, how well does it also work for big cats? Because then this can be like Philiplex, the panel which solves it all for felids. And like I said, Divishri is working in the Terai. So when she did her fieldwork a year or so ago, and she's interested in multi-species connectivity, we're trying to ask, since we're so tiger-oriented, do the results that we infer for tiger in terms of connectivity actually work for all the other species? So she's actually sampled the Terai very extensively. And here she's basically attempted to sample, 3 genera and 6 species, tigers, leopards, fishing cat. So you can see here are basically the small cats are shown here. We've already identified them, and you can see, for example, she's actually got fishing cat, leopard cat, jungle cat, rusty spotted cat, as well as tiger and leopard. And there's also sloth bear. So in this entire landscape, we have sampled all these species, and we've already genetically identified 85 fishing cat samples. So this kind of an approach, when melded with the novel methods, we're hoping can help us get a much more holistic understanding of the landscape. today we're talking about wetlands and fishing cats, but as you can see, this is home, the Tarai is home to so many other species of cats, which are endangered to different levels. And so if we can use similar approaches and, in one shot, understand them better, we get much further towards a landscape-based approach to conservation. And this is our ultimate goal. So I hope I didn't rush too fast. Thank you so much for listening. And as Arundhati has said, we can do questions later.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Uma, for giving a complete perspective on the genetic work that has been done on the fishing cats, especially from the Terai regions. We will quickly move on to the next talk for today, which is by Dr. Girdhar Malla, who is affiliated to the Fishing Cat Conservation Alliance and the Godavari Fishing Cat Project. So Dr. Girdhar is an independent researcher who has been working on conserving small wildcats whilst working with the coastal communities in the area for close to a decade now. His research interests include illustrating wildlife comic books for educational activities for local schools and for the fishing communities. And today he will speak to us more on how we can safeguard the fishing cats in South India's largest delta. So over to you, Dr. Girdhar.
Thank you, Arundhati. Yeah. Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. And first of all, I would like to thank GTF for giving this opportunity to speak on fishing cats. And for everyone, it's like a happy wetland day, because of which we are all here and talking about this charismatic fishing cat, which is like in the wetlands. So right now I'll be talking about like saving the fishing cats in one of the largest deltas in South India. So it all started with my Godavari Fishing Cat project when I started my PhD in 2014 with Wildlife Institute of India. And then I just started realizing that there are certain records of fishing cats in these Andhra Pradesh, which I'm native of. So, but extensively only it's recorded in this big deltas like this Godavari and Krishna. But still we have fishing cats in a lot of non-protected areas, because Andhra has like the second largest contiguous mangrove forests in India. And we have several non-protected patches, and we have around like 30 small to the big rivers, and we have huge deltas in this state. So when we start, when I was extensively working in the Godavari River, and this is where I was talking about, we have several river deltas in South India. This is where extensively I'm working right now, and which includes like around 20 rivers, which cross across Andhra and Tamil Nadu, where I extensively work and survey the fishing cats. And we have recorded fishing cat in most of these river deltas. And except in river deltas in Tamil Nadu, but in Andhra, almost every river delta has fishing cats, and its presence is there. So, and we did most of our surveys with the villagers, and every villagers can identify the fishing cat. Because those are the people, the communities who stay close to the riverine habitats or the mangroves, they see the fishing cats every day. That's where we work with them. That's where our conservation activities started. So when you go to these riverine habitats or these mangrove habitats, you typically see, this is how you see the landscape. You see the communities and you see the mangroves. This is where you all start your work. And previously, what I told is like we extensively worked in the Koringa Wildlife Sanctuary, where Shomita Mukherjee and Uma also mentioned a bit about it. But this is where I extensively worked for 7 years, and we did camera trapping to find out the individual tigers and individual fishing cats and the scats. We identified fishing cats, and then we did community awareness programs and all that stuff. And when I was started working on the fishing cat, this is the first image. I show this picture in most of my presentation, that this is one of my favorite pictures of fishing cat. I saw the fishing cat like this swimming in the creeks of the Godavari River. So with my PhD, I just identified for my one of my chapters, like behavioral observation, I identified around 20 fishing cats in one of the small subtidal creek called as Koringa River, where there are around 20 individuals. And every day I would like to follow them and just see what it eats and how do they behave with each other and how do they fight. There's a lot of fighting. There's like, you can see like two male fishing cats come close to each other, and you can see a huge fight happening between them. And this all happens like because they're closely, they're closely spaced in small mangroves. So because the space is decreasing for them, so that's why there's a huge interaction between individuals. When we looked at the camera trap individuals with this eight individuals of fishing cat, we can see how closely they're moving across each other. You can see the lines there, like how the males and the females move across. You can see that every cat comes to this creek edge to to feed or to hunting or other activities. And recently we published a paper on the fishing cat's dietary habitats, and where we found that fish is like the major component, what Shomita has already told there. And it also feeds on other different prey like birds, because it's a mangrove habitat. We have waders, winter birds, and also we have rodents. And what we found and how I got closely connected with the communities is because of the fish. The communities also depend on the fish, and the fishing cat also depend on the fish. There we have this kind of conflict with both of them. And especially if you see, when we looked into the dietary analysis of the fishing cat, we found one fish which is particularly targeted by this the communities, also by the fishing cat, which is called Mugilcephalus, which is like mullets, which are more in the mangrove habitats across South India and across different mangrove habitats. So this is where the most of the conflict happens, because Mughal is also highly prized by these local communities, because in this particular regions of Andhra, the smokefish is very popular, and the smokefish gets exported to different regions in Andhra Pradesh, like different urban cities. So because of this smokefish popularity in the South India, and many people tend to buy them, and the communities also tend to catch in a large number of these mullets. So this is how typically you can see how the communities catch mullets in the creeks of the Koringa sanctuary, and where they lay a huge net. And when the high tide comes in, when the low tide comes in, they just lift the net so that all the mullets will be entangled, because mullets are more active during high tide and the low tide timings. This is where the conflict happens with the communities. And you can see here one of the camera trap image where the cat was like snatching away one cat. This is catfish actually, but it just took away one catfish from the net, which is placed close to it. And you can see how these nets will be torn by the fishing cat. This is also one form of conflict which the fishers have here. And coming to the threats, what I told earlier, that the space is decreasing for the fishing cat, even in protected areas, which I'm talking of Koringa Wildlife Sanctuary. And if you look at this time series data, you can clearly see that how the space is decreasing. You can see there's a huge coastal erosion is happening on the land seaward side, and you can see a this rampant aquaculture expansion. And to say like Andhra is one of the largest exporter of freshwater fish, and it exports fish to several regions in East India and North India. So this is how the landscape has been changed, which is prime fishing cat habitat. And if you see how the satellite imagery, and if you go to the ground zero, you can see that this is how the coastal erosion looks like. And we have seen fishing cat pug marks in this places which earlier had fishing cats there. We can see the pug marks, and they still come and forage here, even because they're kind of territorial animals. And you can see sand ingression inside the mangroves. This is how the sea level is increasing. When the sand comes inside the mangrove, and the mangrove ultimately die. This is how the habitat is getting lost for the fishing cat. And what we are talking about, the aquaculture. So you can see this kind of huge aquaculture just beside the boundary of the Koringa Wildlife Sanctuary and Krishna Wildlife Sanctuary. This is how the landscape looks like. And also the other important thing which we also are trying to decrease the threats is like blocking the fish. Generally, these communities will block the fish passages, where mullets especially come from the sea, and they actually lay the egg in the mangroves. So that is where the food of the fishing cat also gets decreased. So that's where also we are trying to intervene to make them understand that to just leave certain creeks intact, so that at least the fish passage will happen. And we are closely associated with the Andhra Pradesh Forest Department, and we did the camera trapping in both Koringa as well as in Krishna Wildlife Sanctuary. And right now we are doing this is the first population estimation study in Krishna, which is happening. and which is span across the entire Krishna and the surrounding non-protected areas. And we have started this recently. And we have done a camera trapping workshop to the local forest department and to the frontline staff. And we also involve the communities here. That is that's a positive thing which we did, is like we involve the communities, because the communities, unlike in Koringa, Krishna has a huge this thing for the communities. They hold a lot of lands in the Krishna wildlife sanctuary. There are a lot of villages inside the Krishna. So involving communities will be a very positive thing for our conservation approaches. And in addition to all these ecological and other works, we have a very positive initiative which we started, is the Children for Fishing Cat initiative. And this is where we are so proud of an independent project, which we say. And with this project, we go to every school. We target most of the mangrove dependent, where the children from mangrove communities come and study in these local schools. We target them and we teach them about what is fishing cat and what are the different species which they are there. And in particularly in Koringa Wildlife Sanctuary, we covered around 45 villages. And we also, along with teaching them, we also formed eco clubs in these schools, which actually, in fact, none of the schools know about like eco clubs and other species, and how to nature curriculum will be there. So we formed these eco clubs, and in addition to mangroves, we are also talking about other associated species like birds and molluscans, crabs, which are associated with the mangroves, etc. So this is running good, and this is one of our major conservation activity which we do across the landscapes. We primarily target children because they're very sensitive, and they're the real ambassadors for the fishing cat, because most of the kids stay close to the places where they can see the fishing cat. Most of the children say that they see fishing cats on a regular basis. So this is where we are trying to sensitize this local uh, people towards protecting the fishing cat and conserving them. And the other aspect of the Children for Fishing Cat is that we do illustrations of comic books, and which depicts the daily life of fishing cats, like how do they behave in the mangrove, and what we learn in our PhD or whatever, like in our scientific data sharing. I do it in a simplified forms to the children. And this is where the children also get excited and learn more about fishing cat. And we can see children getting interested, and they also participate in few of our camera trap image identifications. And we also started like a library in one of the southern part of Andhra, where we kept a children's library, where we brought in all the nature books, and mostly regarding the fishing cats and other coastal habitat species, and we displayed them. So every week children come there, read, and they just participate in drawing as well as electrocution competition. So we are trying to sensitize and bring more children aware of these threatened species on the landscape. And also during the COVID time, which was like badly impacted children here, we designed a board game, which is like it depicts the how the fishing cat goes at every lunar tide and what fish it catch. And this is like a board game, and they can this we started in the COVID time, and children really enjoyed this. And these are the pictures during the COVID time. And you can see the children are playing in their free time during that COVID times. So the other thing is like we also design other books like Moon and the Fishing Cat and some other books for children. And right now we are though we focused on the deltas, which has a prime fishing cat habitats, our major focus is right now on identifying the lesser known habitats like in the non-protected regions where we have fishing cats. And we are specifically targeting these non-protected areas because they're entirely used by the communities. And communities, the kind of conflict happens with the poultry and aquaculture, because since it is not protected, most of the mangroves will be converted to the aqua ponds. So there we are trying to intervene, and we are trying to restore some of the lost patches with the forest department, support of the local forest department and communities. That's where we are also focusing now. That's where we are trying to intervene and restore the lost habitat for the fishing cats. And this is where, and also this is how a non-protected patch looks like. Apart from the mangroves, typical mangrove, this is like the grass species and the wetland grass species, which is there. And we see fishing cats moving across mangroves and these grass habitats quite frequently. And coming to this, like what I told, like aquaculture is very rampant in Andhra. You can see here, you can see there are around more than 1 lakh aqua ponds in this particular region in non-protected area below, in between the Krishna and the Godavari River, and around 62,000 hectares of land has been converted to aquaculture. And still you can see fishing cat moving across these human-dominated landscapes. That's the camera trap image where we got. And if you also look at this particular habitat, you can see earlier there were a lot of mangroves, but right now you can see how the aquaculture has entirely shaped the landscape. This is where we saw the fishing cats. And the other biggest threat, apart from all these multiple threats which fishing cat faces, the other problem is the fishing cat getting caught in the traps, where we are also making the communities to understand, and we are having a trap removal program with the support of the local forest department. And we do a lot of awareness program, distributing brochures and doing hoardings. This is our recent intervention with the forest department. We kept the hoardings and Krishna and the non-protected sanctuaries. So this is where the wetland stands for the fishing cat. We have fishing cats everywhere in Andhra, and the only thing is that it faces multiple problems like threats coming across its landscape. So dealing with the communities, creating awareness to the communities is one of the top priority right now for us, and where we are working more on preserving every fishing cat, protecting every fishing cat in this landscape. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Girdhar, for giving an overview of the work that you've done in Godavari as well as Kuringa, and how you have basically sensitized community members towards the species and trying to mitigate the conflicts that it's facing. So we will take questions for your session also towards the end. So quickly moving to the last talk for today is we have Ms. Tyasa Adya, who's the co-founder of the longest running research and conservation program on fishing cats. She's a member of 3 IUCN committees, which falls under the ambit of the Species Survival Commission, and she leads the Indian chapter for the Fishing Cat Conservation Alliance, which is a global cohort of fishing cat experts which work across 8 range countries where of the distribution range of the species. So Tyasa has also received various accolades throughout her career, and the most notable of which being the Nari Shakti Puraskar from the Ministry of Women and Child Development and the Future for Nature Award. And she will speak to us today more on the fish, fishermen, and fishing cat complex that is prevalent in the Chilka system. So over to you, Tyasa.
Thank you so much for a very kind introduction, Arundhati, and thank you to Global Tiger Forum for inviting me to this very distinguished platform. Let me just share the screen. Let me know if you can see the screen. So we do know that today is the World Wetlands Day, and actually what we might not know is that the entire month of February is also celebrated as Fishing Cat February. This initiative was started by the Fishing Cat Conservation Alliance, and it nicely coincides with the 2nd February World Wetlands Day. So to all of you, this we won't say Happy Fishing Cat February because things are not really looking happy, but let's just appreciate the existence of this very beautiful and unique creature. So without much without much ado, I would like to start the talk. So our objective is to actually, like Dr. Mukherjee explained in the very beginning, like Fishing Cat is the ambassador of wetlands. So our objective is to link fishing cat conservation to healthy wetlands and human sustenance. And that is because if we look at the global distribution of fishing cats, we would see that more than 80% actually overlaps with human-dominated landscapes. And therefore, it is important that when we talk about fishing cat conservation, we talk with a socio-ecological conservation lens. And more practically speaking, therefore, our intention is to link fishing cat conservation to improvement of the wetlands health on the one hand, as well as probably link it to how we are helping attain SDG goals for human communities. Now, I work in both West Bengal and Chilika, mostly outside protected areas, but nowadays I'm working more in Chilika. As we know, mostly Chilika is situated outside protected areas. It is, as we know, it's a global heritage, Asia's largest brackish water lagoon, 1,065 square kilometers in area. But it also faces seasonal inundation because in the summer months, this 1,065 square kilometers shrinks to around 900 square kilometers. And therefore, in these seasonal inundated areas lies the wetlands along Chilika Lake or lagoon. So as we can see from this map, this actually represents 115 square kilometers contiguous phragmitis dominated marshland in the north and northeastern section of Chilika. And in the southern side, towards the Bay of Bengal, we have swamp interspersed with human settlements, agriculture, aquaculture, and other land use forms. And in both these habitats, we see the fishing cat. For example, this is the phragmitis. This is how the phragmitis dominated marshland looks like in Chilika. And we also have the swamps, which are formed with mangrove associated species, this is the pandanus actually, and the root systems are very intricate. And it's very hard to penetrate this dense vegetation. So perfect habitat for the fishing cat. And we find both these habitats, and we have recorded fishing cats in both these habitats. So I would like to draw your attention to this one question. When do we really see headlines, concentrated on Chilika hitting the newspapers? It is really during the migratory bird season when, our national news kind of covers things like, okay, so many lakhs of birds have come to Chilika. And this is also the period when the forest department actually, they have these 5 months of anti-poaching camps to deal with bird poaching. But what really happens to Chilika outside this migratory season is not something that is under the conservation surveillance or was. And this is where the presence of fishing cat as an ambassador really helped. And for your information, the Chilika Development Authority, which is the management authority of the government looking after the health and well-being of Chilika, declared the fishing cat as Chilika's official envoy. And what really helped is because it's a resident species, it's present throughout the year. Therefore, we are, in a way, it's helping conservation surveillance to be present in Chilika all throughout the year. Now, it always helps if we have a framework which guides our conservation interventions. I would like to draw your attention to the right side of the chart. And this framework, which is actually our fishing cat conservation framework for Chilika, which we are trying to implement with enforcement agencies as well as local communities, is actually inspired by Dr. Susan Galatovich's, so she's a wetland ecologist in the University of Minnesota, her framework. So in her framework, she identifies drivers of degradation, which leads to identification of ecological stressors, that leads to ecological effects identification, and what is the affected ecological attribute. So in our case, it's the fishing cat. And I'm not going to go into much detail because it will take some time, but just to draw your attention to how things like upland deforestation, dams, pollution, intensive fishing, and even something like reed fire, which I'll talk about in detail later on, actually leads to, if you see in the effects in response, it actually leads to a decrease in the native fishes. And there are studies by Chelka Development Authority to prove this, and a simplification of the fish communities. Now, if you think about it, Chilika is hugely abundant in terms of its fish resources. I mean, Chilika has more than 350 fish species. And that is the reason why in Chilika we have 4 piscivorous mammals. Imagine there's the fishing cat, the smooth-coated otter, we found the Eurasian otter, as well as the Irrawaddy dolphin. And in addition to that, it supports 2 million fishermen family. That is at the core of Chilika's ecosystem. And therefore, if we see the effect that the threats they're having on the fishes are actually affecting both the fishing cat as well as the fishermen. And therefore, we are using this to kind of project the importance of mitigating these threats, not only for biodiversity, but also to keep the socio-ecological spirit of Chilika alive. So of course, we do a lot of research. I'm not going to go much into this, but just to, for information of everybody, we heavily use camera traps. And as we know, it's not really, easy to use camera traps outside protected areas. But we have been quite successful, I would say, because we have been present in the landscape for quite a time now. And of course, so for example, we in 2021 and 22, we concluded a density estimation of the fishing cat in Chilika, that is with the Chilka Development Authority, the Chilka Wildlife Division, and primarily the indigenous fishermen community who all helped. Because as you know, for density estimation, the camera traps have to be out there for 30 days. And this is all outside protected areas. So a lot of support from the indigenous fishermen family, fishermen. We also stress a lot on education. For example, we know that fish is at the core of the ecosystem of Chilika, but what is it that actually maintains that fish population? It has decreased a lot. The diversity and abundance of fishes have really decreased a lot in Chilika, but it is still there. That is why we all find all these species along with invertebrates, a lot of aquatic invertebrates, a lot of birds still come to Chilika. So it's still worth the fight. So coming back, it's the macrophytes, the aquatic plants that is actually the ecological fabric holding all these life forms together and giving food to fishes. And that is why you see it's muddy waters, right? I mean, the fishermen, they do go for fishing, but they can't really see what the world is inside. That is why we have this education center that we have created, which we have called Lifeline of Chilika, where we have these aquarium spaces with just to show children and to show students, and not only local students, but also national students, on the 2 elements that bind Chilika together, that is the macrophytes and fishes. And that in effect, how this is all linked to fishing cats. Apart from that, of course, there are conservation threats, and I'm going to talk about 2 of these because we wouldn't have time to go into details. But one of the very problematic areas is how reed fires happen in Chilika. Yeah, this is something that happens during the summer months, has absolutely devastating consequences for the biodiversity. This is not really highlighted nationally, but this does happen. Apart from, this is the time when we have recorded fishing cats and otters giving birth. This is also the time when native birds lay eggs. So you can imagine what happens when these reed fires, they spread for sometimes to 8 kilometers because the Bay of Bengal pushes the air inside, and once the fire catches, it just spreads. So why does it happen? It happens because there have been processes going upstream that has been affecting Chilika, which is downstream, leading to clogging up of the fishing channels. And fishermen tend to perceive that, they tend to think that if I set fire to the reeds, which they think is clogging up the channels, then it will clear out the channels. What it really does is the reverse of that. Phragmites proliferation actually leads to narrower and narrower channels. Once the fire sets in, the Phragmites grows, it just proliferates. So to mitigate this, we have been bringing this to the authorities, to the enforcement agencies' attention. And I'm glad to share that this year, there are talks of, initiating things like fire lines, for example, inside the Phragmites to keep the fire from spreading, using drones to extinguish the fires, using hose pipes to extinguish the fires. We have been using hose pipes for the last 2 years with Chilka Development Authority, but when it spreads 8 kilometers inside, you just cannot do much. So I'm glad to, we are really glad that the authorities have picked up on the importance of mitigating this threat. And this is something that might, and along with that, dredging of the channels is something that is a management intervention that is supposed to be done regularly. And this year, each of these channels were actually dredged. So these are positive things that have come out of the association that we are, or the collaboration that we have been having with the enforcement agencies. It always helps when officers in charge listen. The other thing is, we have been talking about aquaculture a lot. They are a real threat, especially to coastal wetlands. If I can draw your attention to the right-hand side of the screen, we can see what we see are actually wet meadows. And these wet meadows are seasonally inundated, which means that this is a picture from the dry season, where it seems like these are fields, these are actually wetlands. So these wet meadows are where all these macrophytes occur, and we have the fishes coming in, and the invertebrates breeding, and this also has the Phragmites and Typha, which gives habitat to otters and fishing cats. And this entire food web is being converted by a cancerous growth of aquaculture farms. And actually, like, these seasonally inundated wet meadows are also used by the local communities for seasonal cultivation. So they cultivate a monsoonal rice, which grows only during the monsoon. It's flood adapted, it is organically farmed, but they get very less economic returns. Therefore, when a businessman from outside comes in and says, lease out your land, I will create a aquaculture farm, I'll give you 10,000 rupees per year. That's what they do. So we have started a pilot project to basically encourage farmers to keep on practicing this farming, which is also known to, we have recorded fishing cats using those rice fields, because these rice are flood adapted. They grow 4 to 6 feet in height. So perfect habitat, also seasonal habitat also for fishing cats. These are foraging grounds for birds, which is also why farmers, incur losses. So how do we actually reverse the tide in favor of biodiversity and healthy wetlands? Because these aquaculture farms are actually illegal, and they tend to release a lot of these untreated wastewater directly into Chilika's inland creeks. And according to fishermen, this has led to decrease in fish abundance and killing of fish fingerlings in the long run. So I would request Arundhati to please play the video, so that this is a pilot project that we are doing to start thinking about how we can mitigate this threat. We will only know how it works once it takes off. So Arundhati, if you can please play the video. I'll stop screen sharing.
Yes, just a minute. Is this visible?
Yes.
Okay.
So to all of you watching on YouTube, the rice is going to hit the market, so as to speak, today on 2nd of February, World Wetlands Day. Nicely tunes in with the theme of this World Wetlands Day. So if you buy the rice, it's going to not only help your health, but also farmers, which we hope they will get back 2 to 3 times of the income that they're getting now, so that it kind of encourages them to keep on farming this and not giving their land off for aquaculture. Thank you so much. I look forward to questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tyasa, and all the best for the initiative that you have pioneered and you're launching off today only on the World Wetlands Day. I think this was a very opportune moment to even kind of inform everybody who's joined in on live on YouTube about the initiative. So we'll just quickly go on to the questions before we wrap up our session. So we'll first take in questions for Dr. Shravata. Dr. Shravata, the first question that we have for you is that how much do we know about the morphometry of the fishing cat? Have there been any studies that document, the size and the pug mark size and other things?
Thank you, Arundhati. And no, there haven't been any studies looking at morphometrics, especially using pug marks. But there are measures of the body mass and skull size that you can obtain from any of these, like, old records, like if you look at Pocock. Of course, these documents are not easily available for everybody. But, these are measurements taken from old records, hunting records. So maybe not everybody will be very happy about it, but well, that's the only thing we have. So we really don't have those details of morphometrics. Yeah.
All right. Moving to the second question that is there for you is that you mentioned that there is retaliatory killing in West Bengal. Can you elaborate a little on that? That why is that such a predominant threat and why specifically West Bengal?
Yeah, so I think Tiasha would be in a better position to answer that because she studied that. And, we've kind of collated all the information. Even Bangladesh, there is a very major threat of killing over there. And I think it's because, correct me if I'm wrong, Tiasha, I think in West Bengal and Bangladesh, in most places, especially in the rural landscape, people have these small ponds where they have their own fish.
Yes.
Fish is a very, very major part of the Bengali diet. Okay. And so they grow their own fish over there. And these cats are drawn to those ponds because it's a good resource even for them. And because it's a rural landscape, there's also vegetation around. So they actually, typically speaking, they would thrive in those areas if not for the conflict. Like I mentioned before, they are not very small cats. They are medium sized. So they are very easily, they can be easily observed, one thing. And they are not very large. So they do not really pose a threat to human life. And so they are easy to kill.
All right. So ma'am, those were the questions for you. So moving on to Dr. Uma, the first question for you.
Can I just interrupt 1 minute?
Yes.
I have tasted the rice from Tiasha's field site, and let me tell you, it's delicious. So please.
All right. So we've got PR also for the first for the launch. So okay, moving quickly for the questions.
Thank you, Shobhita.
For Dr. Uma, the first question for you, Dr. Uma, is that is there any protocol or have you been able to differentiate between fishing cat samples from other conspecifics, or do you just pick up the scat samples as when you get them from the field?
Sorry, fishing cat versus, what was that? Fishing cat?
Any other vis-a-vis other conspecifics. Yes.
Yeah. So the thing is, so basically, a lot of times we think that we know, and there are probably people who are better at identifying this is probably a fishing cat, this is probably not a fishing cat, this is probably a jungle cat. But, one of the things that's amazing about India is that we have so many cats, right? We are so lucky. We really have one of the largest number of cats of any country in the world, actually, I think the largest. So the thing is that when there are so many conspecifics, just by chance, you might either make a mistake or you may not be able to tell. Sometimes a scat may not be perfectly formed or something like that. So, when you are making these guesses, that's what I showed that information, that if you just base on a guess, so suppose I go to the field and I say, I think this is a fishing cat, or I'm unsure. So when I'm in a habitat like the Terai, where so many species co-occur, then 30% of the time, 25% of the time, I don't know what it is. Okay. And 30% of the times, if I check the ID genetically, species ID, I'm wrong. So this is basically saying that, it's important to also cross-validate. I'm not saying that we should just blindly go to field and collect everything, but we should also cross-validate what we collect with a genetic ID. And now, in the past, we used to think these are all things which are difficult, they're expensive, but I think genetics has been demystified. It is much cheaper, it is much easier than it was ever before. So I think we can move forward. And as Shomita was saying, in collaboration with, local teams, NGOs, it's really beautiful to see the talks of, Giridhar and Tiasa to move forward together in applying these methods. So it's not like it should only be in some ivory tower lab. We can really take it, pretty much, to the field.
All right, ma'am. And the next question for you is that from the samples, the cat samples that you're collecting, have you been able to identify diet or any other specific information apart from, population genetics that you do?
So we have not done that in the context of the fishing cat, but we are doing it in other contexts, in other landscapes. So we're working, for example, in Taroba on diet of 3 carnivores and 3 herbivores. And what we do there is, basically when you're trying to understand the fishing cat, most of the fishing cat DNA is kind of on the top part of the scat, because basically when the fecal sample is passing through the intestine, it's pulling off cells. And so most of the fishing cat cells are on the top of the scat. So when we want to investigate diet, we break open the scat and we take pinches from inside the scat, because most probably the prey DNA is in the inside. And then we basically use methods called metabarcoding. These have become very popular. You may have read about this environmental DNA methods. Recently, there was a paper where, water from spider webs is being used to look at what the spider is eating and so on. Amazing stuff with trace DNA, which is left in these things. So then you can also look at diet. And basically, if you compare, these like genetic approaches to diet to traditional approaches with hair, we find that actually one thing is we often miss out on lots of species in the traditional, like the hair-based approaches, because we have a bias. We think that, this animal is only eating A, B, and C, and we compare it to hair of A, B, and C. However, animals actually eat lots of other things, and we pick them up with the genetics. So since it's an unbiased approach, the metabarcoding approach can pick up kind of a diversity of diet, which may not be possible. So that's really interesting. And I think that, I think that, I mean, this is not, maybe I'm going a little out on the limb, but the idea of these fish ponds, they could be really amazing tools for conservation. If it is possible to, kind of sustain populations and have, sustainable populations of fishing cats in this, people fishing cat, synergy, there's some offtake allowed by the fishing cat, and the people had other ways, were either compensated somehow, or I don't know. I'm not a conservation scientist in that sense, but it would be a really nice model to explore for conservation.
Right, ma'am. So also coming to the third question that was there for you was on the environmental DNA. That has there any been study done that looks at, identifying cat species or the smaller cat species using eDNA technology? Would you have any idea about that? I mean, it's not pertinent to this, but just if you do know how.
No, I haven't done that, but it would be a fantastic study to do. There's been some really nice studies in the US where they have actually taken like camera trap data. They have picked up DNA from pug marks, basically like swabbed pug marks. You have a pug mark, you take like a nasal swab, which you got a COVID test with, and you just swab it, and then you bring it back to the lab and do species identification. We've tried that a little bit. We've played with it, and we do get some results, but we have not done a systematic study. A systematic survey design, which combines, survey based on, like field experience, environmental DNA collection, and then also camera trapping as well as cat collection, some very intensive such approach to look at small cats and small cat communities would be really, really wonderful. And maybe this GTF program or others would really take this up as a opportunity.
Shoma, we can explore that later. So now moving on to the next question that we have for Dr. Girdhar, and I think this question I'd like to request Piyasal to also answer after Dr. Girdhar answers. So the question is that how receptive have local communities been to the awareness and sensitization workshops given the conflict status that is prevalent in these areas?
Yeah, so before we can just see the difference between before and after. Before I went to the landscape where the awareness was not there to the thing which we compare when awareness, especially for the children we give. So you can see a huge difference between like people understanding fishing cats need and the especially the kids coming to you and just telling that today I have seen the fishing cat here and I told my the neighbors not to chase it away. It was just going on its own. So that kind of relationship has been built up after we started the interventions. But still, the communities are well versed with what is fishing cat and how does it stays and everything. But our initiatives would help a little bit more to sensitize them. That's what we understood. And especially when we built the library, that entirely changed the scenario of how they had the bad reputation on fishing cat coming to the aquaculture ponds and taking over the fish. But when as a project and as a collective thing of conserving the fishing cat, we went with a motive. So then the entire scenario has changed the village. The village were more welcoming the fishing cat. Even the retaliatory killings have been decreased in the mangrove patches and the aquaculture. That's kind of sensitization awareness has created in this one. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, if you could just give your viewpoint also from your work, Chilka.
Yeah, so because I've worked in both West Bengal and the Chilika landscape, there's a contrast because in West Bengal, it's a very high human density. And a lot of these natural wetlands have actually been converted. So all we have are the, not all we have, but most of what we have are these small aquaculture ponds that are used by people. And fishing cats also tend to take Black Bengal goats, so country goats and also, country fowls. So that also creates problems. And in addition to that, there is a lot of killing because of fear. So it's a very elusive cat in that sense, even though it lives amongst people, but often they don't tend to see the fishing cat commonly. So a glimpse of it in the night tends to tell them, okay, I mean, maybe it's a leopard, let's just kill it. So it's like that. So I would say mostly it has been, and the Chilika landscape, in contrast, we don't really see any conflict here because Chilika is open to all. It's for all. People go and fish, fishing cats also fish, otters also fish. For Chilika, the threats are more to do with habitat related, threats. So when we overall, yes, sensitization awareness programs have definitely helped because we used to see fishing cat meat being sold 65 rupees per kilo in open markets in West Bengal. That has gone down now. If people kill fishing cats, they are going to get arrested. Enforcement has been made much stronger now. And overall, we have seen independent conservation initiatives starting on fishing cats, which is a great thing because in 2010, when we started, there was nothing like that. Media is used to, like daily. So for example, these leading dailies would publish a photograph of a fishing cat and underneath it would be written dead civet or something like that. Nowadays, forget it. I mean, no media would actually go around, like misidentifying fishing cats. So I think overall, it does help. However, retaliatory killings because of people incurring loss is a complicated issue. So I think it is not going to be solved only through sensitization and awareness programs.
All right. Circling back to Girdhar, the next question for you is that you've mentioned that children often come across this species within the area. So how often do the community members or children from the coastal regions encounter fishing cats?
It depends on the village, how close it is to the mangroves. And few villages like children or communities, they see fishing cat on a daily basis because they just come around because most of the villages are surrounded by this marshy habitat or this mangroves. And the fishing cats come there daily, they see them. they'd see them every day. So that's how, like, when I started in one of the area where I was working for my PhD, actually, it's one of the kid who told me that there's a fishing cat moving here. So it's like they know that the fishing cats are here.
All right. And coming to the last question that is there for today for Dr. Tiasa is that in terms of Chilika, how has been the the perception of communities vis-a-vis the fishing cat? Like, what is the paradigm shift that you've seen across the years of experience that you've had working in both these landscapes? Like, are they more receptive or co-occurred with them happily, or is there some sort of conflict that still exists despite the awareness and the other programs that you are running in that landscape?
So in Chilika, particularly, as I said, there is hardly any conflict with fishing cats and fishermen. Yes, I mean, there used to be occasional, times when fishing cats would get entangled in the net and people would, eat them. That has definitely stopped. And in terms of reception, I would say it has led to an increase in knowledge because people did not, except for fishermen who stay in Chilika in the night. So there are two types of fishermen, diurnal, people who fish in the daytime and people who fish in the nighttime. So daytime fishermen actually did not see fishing cats. They didn't even know there was, something like that, even though we have high densities of fishing cats in Chilika, 60 individuals per square kilometer. So, but the nighttime fishermen, they are the ones who saw fishing cats. And when we asked them initially 2018, when we started the project here, we asked them, how many fishing cats do you think exist in this landscape? They would say, can you look at the sky and see the stars? That's the amount of fishing cats there are in Chilika. Lakho hai. So, and in the process of involving them in the monitoring of camera traps, in Chilika for the density estimation and involving them in identifying individuals. Therefore, when we together arrived at the result, they could see that, there are no lakhs and lakhs of fishing cats, but yes, definitely there are cats. And now they're monitoring fishing cats. They're naming them Choti, Srimati, and all these names have come up. So it definitely has led to, a stronger link between the local resident communities and fishing cats in Chilika. West Bengal, it's not so straightforward. It's very complicated because the issues are complicated. There's a lot of political, economic, and social factors. I would definitely say there is a lot of increased awareness, a lot of increased involvement of independent agencies in fishing cat, which is very encouraging to see. But simultaneously, you have industries coming up, you have lots of conversion, you have a lot of roadkills. In the last 12 months, there were 18 fishing cat deaths from roadkills, 18, out of which 13 were females from just, these two districts. So you can imagine of course, this is not related to communities, but I'm saying that, there is retaliatory killing as well. Then there are all these other factors. So it's very complicated. It's not so straightforward, but things are generally to do with local stakeholder involvement. It's positive. It has been positive in the last 14 years.
All right, Vyasa. So with that, I think that was the final question for today's webinar. We conclude the webinar, and on behalf of the Global Tiger Forum, I would like to thank Dr. Shomita, Dr. Uma, Dr. Girdhar, Tiasa for taking time out of the busy schedules and joining us for this talk. And to the viewers on YouTube also, I hope you got to know more about this lesser known mesopredator across, the kind of work that is being done across India for the species conservation and the initiatives that the community has taken up, with one being launched today with the Chilka Red Rice initiative. So with this, we come to an end to the talk today, which looked into the fishing cat perspectives on the World Wetlands Day on, as habitat specialists of wetlands. Next week, we'll be back next week with our next talk, which will be again focusing on the fishing cat, but with a global perspective from, and we will have insights from representatives from countries where the distribution of the fishing cat is there. And we will be back next week at 3 p.m. at the same time on the YouTube channel. So do tune in for that talk also. And once again, to all our speakers and to the audience who joined in, namaskar, and I hope you have a very nice day and happy World Wetlands Day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
Bye.